Good morning, everyone. It is my honor this morning to introduce our speakers, Professor Bobby Brewer-Wallin and Willamette student Isabella Bowers. Professor Brewer-Wallin is a costume designer and also the professor of theater at Willamette University. He earned his Master of Fine Arts in Costume Design from the California Institute of Arts. In year 2000, he went to work for Willamette University in the theater department and has been there since then. He teaches courses on costume design, global fashion history, and seminars on protest clothing, the material culture of resistance, material culture and the art of storytelling, and Voices of the Pacific Northwest, and a seminar that he and Isabella are going to share information with us today about on clothing and memory. With Professor Brewer-Wallin is Isabella Bowers. She, as I said, is a Willamette student. She's a first-year student, and she intends to major in either exercise, health science, or psychology. She, after she graduates, she intends to earn a master's degree in occupational therapy. We are so thankful to have you, and please join me in welcoming Professor Brewer-Wallin and Isabella.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Just like a regular classroom, there are people in the front and people way in the back. So I'm glad to know that these patterns don't change. So yes, thank you, Anne. Thank you to WICL for inviting me. Anne reached out quite a while ago with interest in my course. And so happy to be here. I last was able to speak with this group in March of 2020, just days before the world shut down. So I hope that today's lecture doesn't involve a global pandemic. So I do recognize some friendly faces, former professors and staff members, and it's always a pleasure to talk with this group. So as Anne mentioned, I have been at Willamette since 2000, so this is my 26th year. This is also my final semester. I'm retiring at the end of this year. So happy to have this opportunity to speak. So this idea of clothing and memory first came to me when I was on sabbatical in the spring of 2011, and my wife was leading a study abroad program with Chemeketa, and we were living in London, and I had the good opportunity to go to all of the wonderful museums that are in London, and if those of you who have traveled know that most of those are also free, right? So it was just could go constantly. And with my interest in the history of clothing, the more and more I was looking at some of these very old pieces, I began to think about what are the memories that a garment holds. So, of course, we as humans have memory of clothing, right? Maybe it was something that was made specially for you. Maybe it was the garment that you wore on your wedding day, or for graduation, or some other momentous occasion. But clothing also holds memory in its creases and its folds and its stains. And those are the things that maybe we don't think about always. And so that just kind of got my brain percolating a little bit. The following summer, I was able to work with a colleague in the art department, and we worked with a couple of students on a visual project on memory. And each of us engaged in different medium, and I did a series of oral histories with different people and collected some garments and then created an exhibit around that. And then the following year, I thought I should turn this into a class because I think that students might also be interested in this topic. What's interesting to me about talking to a group like you is that you have a long life and you hold many memories about various times in your life. Most of my students, first-year students, are 18 years old or maybe 17. And so their experience in life is shorter, and yet at the same time, they hold interesting memories that maybe some of us don't. So with this class, it's part of Willamette's College Colloquium, which is a first-year seminar that all first-year students take. And there might be 20 or 30 different classes taught by professors around the university on a whole variety of topics. And the idea with those classes is to develop students' skills in close reading, discussion, and writing, right? So the topic is just a vehicle, really, to work on those things. So we are asked to ask the students to complete a summer assignment. So before classes even start, we're asking them to do something. Typical of Willamette, right? More and more and more. I took this prompt from the book Worn Stories by Emily Spivak, and there's also a audio recording of an interview that she completed. So I sent the students the link to the audio recording, asked them to listen to the recording, and then to write a short essay with this question. Everyone has a memoir in miniature in at least one piece of clothing. What story can your clothes tell? And it might be, again, it might be a momentous event that happened, or it could be an everyday experience. And so the essays that I received back, and I was reading through them again this morning, many involve t-shirts. T-shirts are part of the culture of this generation, of the younger generation, and many of those t-shirts have a slogan or some kind. We pick up t-shirts when we travel. We might have a t-shirt that's part of our sports team. And young people collect these t-shirts not wanting to get rid of them, right? Because if I get rid of it, then I might forget that memory of what's associated with it. And more than one student, including Isabella, talked about the possibility of making a quilt from those saved t-shirts. Whether she did or not, I don't know, but maybe she can share with that later. But other topics from those students from last year's class included memory of a wetsuit. And the wetsuit was important to this student. He grew up in the UK, lived in London, but spent summers with his grandmother in Cornwall. And the experience of every summer getting to surf with his grandmother was a powerful reminder to him about a wetsuit, right? Which we wouldn't think about as an object that would hold particular memory for us. I often get students who tell me about immigrant parents and their experience with maybe early life that was filled with poverty, right? And so clothes weren't abundant. And so what they had was significant. Students often tell me, they share with me early on identity stories and how clothing was important to their queer identity, their identity as a student of color, right? And so it's all kinds of stories that can be shared through the garments that we wear. So this talk is also about the pedagogical approach. So how do I work with students for them to continue to develop these ideas of reading, writing, and discussion so that it's not just formulaic, and for them to realize the abundant resources that are on this campus. So one of the first set of readings that we engaged with was Rebecca Dobkin's book, The Art of Ceremony. Some of you may remember Rebecca as a professor in the anthropology department who does a lot of work, curation in the Halliford Museum of Art with the collections around the indigenous people of Oregon. And so with this book, we read a couple of the chapters where she specifically is writing about the ceremonial regalia that many of our indigenous people use as part of their everyday practice, but also in terms of particular ceremonies. The Halliford Museum has a wonderful exhibit called Ancestral Dialogues. Many of you have probably seen it if you've visited it. It's part of the permanent collection upstairs, but it also has some rotating images, and they've recently restructured that whole exhibit with a large collection of masks. And so if you haven't been in a while, please, I encourage you to check it out. So I take my students to the Halliford Museum of Art, and for many, it is their first time going to an art museum. And that's profound, because to me, going to an art museum is like part of my DNA. I've grown up with it. But for many students, that was not their experience. And so realizing that the Halliford is their museum, that they can walk in for free anytime, right, is powerful. So we look at the work, and then I ask them to write about it, and we talk about the connections that they see from the reading to the viewing of the art, and the possibility that, again, for many of them, an introduction to indigenous peoples is new, right? So again, just trying to expand the resources that our students have, that it's not simply just reading a book for what's inside, but that there are ways to amplify what we see there. I also find that it's important for students to know how to read an image. So not only are we reading text, but we're also looking at visual images, and how do visual images inform what we know. And so we look at several writings by Black Americans, and this particular article by Sarah Elizabeth Lewis for Black suffragists, The Lens Was a Mighty Sword, and she's examining the photographs of women especially in the early part of the late 19th century, early part of the 20th century, and the way that suffragists, and especially Black suffragists, use photography to demonstrate who they are, demonstrate their power, demonstrate that they are similar and dissimilar to their to the white suffragists. And one of the reasons that the women's right to vote took so long, took almost 70 years to pass, was there were people who had different beliefs about what it would mean for women to vote. And just like today, right, we hold on to our opinions about voting, and just because someone is a Republican or a Democrat doesn't mean that they always believe in the exact same things as you, right? And they may choose to vote in a particular way based on their own set of importances. Yeah. And so we look at a photograph like this, which is 4 college women sitting on the stairs. And so we talked about the way that they're dressed and what the implications of their dress mean, and how even we read that photograph compared to if we saw 4 women in 2026 sitting on steps, right? They would not be dressed like this. This looks very formal to us, and yet this was everyday dress for people at this time, right? People in the 19th century just didn't have the abundance of clothing that we have today. There's a formality and a stiffness to the way that people dress when we look at those photos. And so frequently the readings that we would engage with didn't have images in them, so sometimes these texts are just filled with words. And so one of the exercises that I have my students engage with is identifying sections in the text that need an image, right? And so we're visually annotating the text. And so I set up a shared Google slide deck, and teams of students can then add images to that shared slide deck, and then together we can go back and we can discuss why they chose the particular image that they chose. And not only are they including images, but they have to include the bibliographic citation of where that image came from. So we try to move beyond Google, right? Yes, there are ways to search for images beyond Google. Also, you taking advantage of our library and the resources and the databases that are embedded within our system, right, that allow us to search more authentically for historical images. One of their first in-class essay projects was a photo essay that I call "What Does Your Closet Say?" And this is based on an exhibit, an installation that was held at the Met of this woman named Sarah Berman. And when Sarah Berman died, her children took the items that were in her closet and created this installation, object for object. And so what we can see is was a woman who, after her husband died and her children grew up, moved into a very small New York apartment and simplified her wardrobe in such a way that it was monochromatic. And there were very few objects included in the closet, right? The sort of essential things that she had. And what intrigued me not only about Sarah Berman's closet, but was because my students had just moved onto campus. And so as students, they are thinking about, I have to select particular items from my home and bring them to this dorm room, and it's probably smaller than what they had at home. And so essentially they are curating their closet at Willamette. And so what I asked them to do was to take 5 photographs, and then for each photograph to create essentially like a gallery placard where they are describing what is on the photo. They also then had to write a bio for the person whose closet this was, right? So it's multiple, these are different forms of writing, right? Writing that we all engage in, and how do we communicate those ideas clearly in a short statement. They were also given the choice. They didn't have to do their own closet if they felt like that might be a little bit weird for their professor to see what's in their closet. They could also choose a friend. I had one student who lived off campus, and he chose to do his parents' closet closet, which was enlightening. What is shared and revealed are the choices that these students made, not only of what they wanted to bring to college, but what were the important things that held precious memory for them. So everything from what they really needed to exist to one student whose family has an Afghani background, has some really beautiful jewelry, and they chose to bring some of that jewelry and display it in their closet in an artful kind of way. Sports gear. There was a student who shared that she has OCD and that her closet has to be organized in a very particular way. Otherwise, it disrupts her own ability to study, right? Because she can see that something's out of place. So when students, or when any of us, have the opportunity to talk about who we are, talk about our identities, talk about our disabilities, right, that sort of is empowering, right, and allows us to sort of like move on to the next thing. So it's an engaging project. I would invite all of you, when you return home, to look at your own closets and ask, what does your closet say about who you are? The next series of readings that we did focused on clothing and grief. And the first article was Notes on Materiality, Ritual and Grief. The second was Clothes, Mourning, and the Life of Things. And the third was a short story called The Red Pashmina. Each of these, the first two are essays, chapters from books. The third, as I just mentioned, is a short story. So different kinds of readings, but all talk about the sentimental value that clothing holds, especially when it's connected to grief and the loss of someone special in our lives. And I'm sure that each of you can think about a garment that somebody close to you had, and you've either inherited it, it was given to you, or you simply can't give it away. In the first two, the essays, both really also talk about for men, if the male partner is left behind, they want to quickly get rid of things because the reminder is too painful. And for women, it's often that need to hold on to things in order to process that grief. One of the items of clothing that was discussed in the Clothes, Mourning, and the Life of Things is a leather jacket, pictured here, that was the jacket of a colleague that this man is writing about. And he talks about wearing that garment, that jacket, and that he can smell his friend. And that scent is often a real trigger for memory, which is very powerful, right? So if we have had somebody die in our life and we have a shirt or a sweater or some garment, right, when we put it close to our face, even if we don't wear it, we can still have some sense of who that person was. And so memory is this kind of powerful emotion. It's also cognitive. Sometimes it's our own memory. Sometimes it's a collective memory. And in addition to scent, right, it's often about something that's tactile, right? Something that has a feel to it. And one of my earliest memories, although I'm not sure it's my own memory, I think it's a memory that I think is mine because of how many times I've been told the story, right? Or seen the photograph, right? We can all kind of connect to that. And I was 2, so probably it's not my own memory. But my uncle and aunt and cousins were living in Puerto Rico at the time. This was 1966, and my family was traveling there for Christmas. And it was my mom and my brother and I, and we got our connecting flight was delayed, and my mom had not packed my blanket with the satin edge on that I liked to rub my fingers on to comfort myself. And right, she thought, well, we're it's going to be quick. I don't need to put that in a carry-on bag. So she lifted up her skirt, and her slip was the same kind of satin feeling. And so for me, just having that tactile sensibility, right, provided comfort. And I always wonder, like, was that an early indication of my future work? This interest in textiles, this interest in storytelling and fabrics and the way that they inform us. Hard to know. This article, called Queer Fashion and Style, Stories from the Heartland, Authentic Midwestern Queer Voices Through a Museum, this is an article that was published in a journal and was included with an exhibition. This research was done by conducting interviews with women who identified as queer or lesbian in the Midwest. And the researchers actually found it difficult to find enough subjects, people who were willing to talk about their identity in that way. But the information that they did glean from this showed a wide perspective of the way that people choose to put clothing on their bodies. And in addition to the information that they gathered, they also asked these participants to include a garment or an outfit, and then the museum was able to put together a display to open up a dialogue for people within the community to understand the diversity of people living in this particular area, the diversity in the way that queer people dress. And for many of my students, coming to college is sometimes the first time, right, that they can really be out in terms of who they are. Not all of them, right? Some they've been able to be out to their families and friends for a long time. But for many, coming to Willamette and coming to college is really a time to express that. And so, again, those conversations about memory can be fostered simply by reading an article that some people can more clearly identify than others. And we foster that sense of openness in the discussions that we have in the classroom, where some people's opinions may differ greatly from your own, and that's okay. And conversations in college are different probably than conversations in high school, right? Where maybe those conversations couldn't go very deep because, number one, there's so many people in a classroom, but also because people didn't feel safe to talk about those things. This book was a book that I came across many years ago. It's called Evocative Objects, Things We Think With, and it's written by Sherry Turkle, who is a professor at MIT. She's not a person who is working with clothing or textiles, but thinks a lot about the way that our brains function and the way that we engage in the world. And in this particular text, there's a number of essays all written by other folks, but it's focused on material objects. And so everything from a typewriter is talked about. There's an essay about a yellow raincoat, to a pin or a brooch, some other piece of jewelry. And one of the interesting essays, I think, was the article on the yellow raincoat, that it was written by this man who has continued to study the way that neurodiverse people think differently than the majority of the population. And he wrote about this experience with his brother, who would wear his yellow plastic raincoat pretty much any time of year. And he wore it because it gave him this sense of protection from the world. And he liked the color. The color made him feel safe, right? So again, just a short little essay, a few pages, talking about the way that people experience or go through life, especially childhood memories, are really engaging. And I really enjoy working with students in that way to understand the way that their early brains are thinking, but also like how do we take that information into our future when we know something about ourselves. We next read two articles, one called Creases, Crumples, and Folds from the Fashion Studies Journal, and the other in Praise and Restitution of Perished Clothing from the Costume Society of America. And these two articles look at this notion of what I mentioned at the very beginning of my talk, was the way that creases and folds and stains and smells hold memory in clothing. And typically, a museum doesn't display a garment that is somehow damaged, right? It doesn't exemplify the history the way that they want to put it out. But these two writers really amplify this idea of what we can learn from those things, from the garment itself. And the second article, in Praise and Restitution of Perished Clothing, these two scholars put together an exhibit of just clothing items that were damaged in some way. And what was interesting in the article was their approach to how they created the exhibit, with not only the garments themselves, but their notes, their timelines, their connections, the things that we might not normally put on display, that would sort of be curated in a more careful way. But this allowed viewers to see the process of how an exhibit might go together. And when we read and talked about this, then I went into Willamette's collection of garments in the theater and pulled out some very old things, mostly from the 19th century, early 20th century, and brought them in and asked the students to spend time and to study them a little bit, and to see, number one, could they identify anything about the garment? What kind of garment was it? How was it worn? And then to clearly articulate what kind of damage, creases, folds do you see in this, and how might you imagine these things came about, right? And so it's a little bit of detective work, right? But it's what a museum conservator might do, what a museum exhibitor might do. And we can learn a lot about old clothes by studying them carefully, not only about their construction, but also how they might have been modified over time, how they might have been creases and folds, an attempt to get rid of some of those things, but in some fabrics, they simply just can't be. And in the photo here, we're seeing a silk garment, and what happens oftentimes to silk over time is it shatters. And so it sort of, it breaks apart, like if you were to hit a window, right, and it kind of like shatters away. And so sometimes a museum will try to preserve that by putting like a netting or some kind of a sheer fabric over top of it, right, in order to keep that there. We often find stains within a garment because, of course, in the 19th century, people didn't wash their clothes like we wash our clothes today. Frequently in women's garments, we might see stains at the neck or in the front, because one of the last things that you do when you get dressed is spray yourself with perfume. And the perfume, if not washed out over time, can stain a garment. Or there might be dirt or wear on the hem of something, or blood or rust or tea or anything that might have been spilled on a garment that didn't get properly cleaned, right? And all of those are memory in some way. We read 3 short stories, The Denim Jacket, 11, and We Came All the Way from Cuba So You Could Dress Like This. And these are short stories that really look at immigrant families. They focus on children and children's own experience with dress. And I think that they really enlighten also the shame that sometimes goes along with the clothing that we have to wear, because it's the only thing that we have. So that repeated wear, so maybe something that doesn't get washed regularly or something that doesn't fit us anymore. And these are beautiful short stories that I think we can all identify with in some way. The final one is definitely an immigrant story where the child chooses to dress in a more outrageous way, drawing attention to themselves. And the parents simply like, I worked so hard for you to bring you to this country, and you're going to dress like that, right? And so it's that balance, right? And so, of course, we want our children to create their own identity and find their own path. But sometimes there's a lot of struggle there. And clothing, because it's one of the easiest ways that young people can change their identity, it can be harmful too. So we come back to this book at the end of the semester and read more of the essays to engage in the first-person accounts that can be extraordinary, sometimes funny, tragic, poignant, celebratory, accounts of clothes that are encoded with memory and the stories of our lives. And so for their final project, I asked students to conduct an oral history with someone they know. It could be a parent, a relative, somebody from campus, and ask them to think about this idea of what is a clothing item they have that they can tell a story that's filled with memory. And so I asked Isabella to come because she was in my colloquium last semester and wrote a really beautiful piece about her aunt. And she's going to tell you a little bit about that. And when she's finished, then I think we'll have a few moments for some questions. Okay?
Hi, as all of you know, Professor Bobby had a colloquium class called Clothing and Memory. When I signed up for that over summer, I wasn't really sure what I was going to get myself into, but afterwards I was very glad I did because it prepared me for all the reading I have to do in college, which is very helpful. For the final project, Professor Bobby asked us to do an interview and turn it into an oral history project. I didn't really know where to start with this project, but I knew I had to find someone to talk to, so I started with my brother, actually my older brother. I asked him if he had any pieces of clothing that had any strong memorial, memory to it, and he just flat out responded no. So I was like, okay, great, so I have to go find someone else. So I thought I could do my mom, who would probably mention something about the Patriots or Providence College, which was her alma mater. And I was like, that could be a little boring sometimes. So then I thought I could do my dad, who would respond with like a one-word response or fall asleep halfway through the interview. I really do love him, but he falls asleep a lot. So, and then I started thinking about extended family, and I eventually thought of my Aunt Brenda. My Aunt Brenda, she is my mom's oldest sister, and my mom was raised on the East Coast, and Brenda has stayed there. So she and my mom are very close, so I tend to visit Rhode Island, where Brenda has lived her whole life, every summer. We always go to the beach, and without a doubt, every time she wears a beach cover-up. It's like a little shawl, but she makes it into a cute little fashionable skirt. So I took that knowledge of her cute outfits, and I asked her to help me with this assignment. This was my first time interviewing someone, so I was nervous and didn't really know what I was doing. She was a really good first interview for me because she would help ground me, and she's a talker. So with her constant talking and little tangents she would go on, it helped me find my footing throughout the interview process. And I was like still a little nervous, even though she was my aunt. It was like for a school project, so I was still nervous about the grade. In preparation for the project, I wrote down some general questions like, what's your favorite piece of clothing and why, and what kind of memories are attached with said piece of clothing, and stuff like that. And then when it came to the actual call, I did ask some of the prepared questions, and I started the interview by asking her if she had ever heard of Worn Stories, the story we previously read by Emily Spivak. And she had not, so it took some time to explain that to her, and she really enjoyed the meaning behind it, which was great for me because I was about to do the exact same thing. As I was asking some of the questions, the conversation felt more casual, I guess, and less interviewee, which was comforting, and the flow of the conversation was really nice. As I said before, I was expecting her favorite piece of clothing was going to be one of those beach shawl cover-ups, but I was wrong. When I asked her the question of her favorite piece, she responded with, "It's a jacket, it's a stole, it was my grandmother's." I had never heard of this jacket before, I've never seen it, so I was kind of taken aback. I learned it had belonged to her paternal grandmother, Nilda, and she told me about the strong connection she and her grandmother had. I actually don't know much about my great-grandmother because my mom is the youngest, so she was about 3, 4 when my great-grandmother passed, but Brenda was older. So my mom's memories of Nilda were lacking. So it was good to go to Brenda so I could learn more about her. As I said before, throughout the phone call, she brought up memories that involved the jacket. She remembers a picture of Grandma Nilda and her husband, Grandpa Mike. They were going to some sort of event where they had to dress fancy, and she doesn't know what this event was, but there's a picture of them standing there, and Nilda was wearing the jacket. Brenda was young, around 12 years old, so she doesn't have memories of Nilda in the jacket because, one, she was young when she passed, and it was a fancy jacket, and they hung out more casually. But the jacket itself helped bring a connection to her grandmother, even decades after her passing. She can look at it and remember going down the 3 flights of stairs in their 3-tenement house to the first floor where Nilda lived, and would give her a craft, like a paper mache or a flower, but looking at that jacket always made her remember her grandmother. This project helped me develop a deeper understanding of clothes. Before this course, I thought clothes were just a form of expression and a way to cover up and be more modest. But I now know that they're a lot more than that. I look at someone on the street and wonder about the background of the sweater that they might be wearing, or the tie, or even like socks. I wonder the meaning behind why someone wore that or decided to keep that object. Clothes hold memories, and memories tie us to the past. Some memories might not always be good, but they help shape us into who we are today, and that project helped me figure that out. So I thank Bobby for making me do that. So thank you.
So we do have some time for questions, I think. I don't know how much time we have. 5 or 10 minutes, okay. Just wanted to give a shout out that if you're interested in a more complete list of the readings, I'm happy to share that. I can either give all of those to Anne, or you can contact me directly through my Willamette email, or visit my website, which is bobbybrewer-wallin.com. You can see other examples of my work. So.
Hi, my name's Cassia. Longtime ICL member, very much interested in costuming. So the question I have is, what about cultural appropriation? Well, not only from, say, African culture to American culture, which we saw a lot of in the 60s, to our current appropriation of the young persons appropriating what essentially are work clothes, blue jeans, ripped blue jeans, which they would never rip. You would never wear ripped blue jeans 25 years or 30 years ago or 40 years ago when we were young. Okay? So what does that say about the progress of clothing now, and also about the deterioration in the quality of clothing that's available?
Mm-hmm. That's a big question. So I think, it comes up a lot in my courses, and I think we can think about it, one, in sort of our everyday dress, and I think, as you mentioned, current fashions do reflect strongly on laborers of the past, right? We wear denim jeans, and many people have no idea where the history of denim comes from. Even that denim itself is a textile that was made by enslaved people. And, that laborers in the 20s, 30s, and 40s wore denim because it was a rugged material. And today we wear it simply for fashion, right? It's a whole nother thing when we think about cultural appropriation in terms of what we put on stage, and the representation of various minority groups or cultural groups. And so we have to be very sensitive about the choices that we make and what kind of message we're trying to put forward. How individual people think about cultural appropriation, I think begs the question that we all just be more aware of what we put on our bodies and what history might be included in that. Oftentimes, some of us of a certain age have things in our closet that maybe we don't wear anymore because of the ramifications of cultural appropriation. And then we have to say, well, then what do I do with it, right? How can I gift it? How can I donate it? How can I dispose of it in some way? Because it might be valuable to you. It might have been acquired on a trip that holds memory for you. And so it's a wonderful and complicated question that we could probably spend a full hour or more on. So I'll leave it at that if there's other questions.
Hi, my name is Judy. I'm a fairly recent member of ICL. Thank you for the presentation, because I had a 76-year memory as you were talking, and I hadn't thought of it for a long time. My question is first, I have a memory to share, but the question I have to go with that is, as a freshman coming to college, the assimilation when you come onto campus does have a lot to do with how you look. But you're also trying to share who you are. I was unable to do that when I went to Syracuse University in 1967. The fall of '67, I traveled across the Atlantic Ocean from England to go to college. My trunk was following me. There was probably a longshoreman strike. I came with one suitcase of lightweight clothing. It's Syracuse. By November, it's very cold. I had no winter coat. What I found was in order to become who I was that first semester, it depended on those students who kindly lent me clothes. I had no sweaters, I had no coat, I had no boots, I just came with a very lightweight suitcase. And I thank them, and I think to myself, they didn't know who I was if I was to be identified by what I was wearing. I had to reach out and try to share who I was in different ways. And the other part of it was I realized the memories and the important items that I wanted to bring to college. I had no family in the States that I would be visiting. They were all abroad. So I had things in that trunk that were very special to me, and I didn't have them that first semester. But anyway, thank you. I just wanted to share that.
That's a wonderful memory. And yes, I think how a student arrives on campus and how they begin to present themselves shapes what friends they make right away, what connections they make. And of course, clothing today is one of the easiest ways for us to change ourselves. And so if maybe we're wanting to fit in differently, we can change our clothes to help clarify our identity. And in your situation, you couldn't just go online and order a new coat or run down to Target or the local, shop to get what you needed. And so thank goodness for the kindness of your peers. Yeah.
Okay, hi, I'm Lisa. And I thought this was so interesting. First of all, being a woman and, just collecting clothes. And I have a daughter and, she's grown now. But what we like to do is I go to her house and she says, well, I'm giving away all these clothes. And I say, no, first I'm going to look through them. And there was something I gave to her and then she gifted it back to me because she said, Mom, I don't want this anymore. And also I have a stepdaughter who got married in a Hindu ceremony. And that was just a real eye-opener because there are so many different, saris you wear. And the whole getting ready for the wedding takes about, 4 people just to get you dressed. And there are different saris for every different ceremony. And I even took them home because my stepdaughter said, no, I don't need them. And then just one more thing, my aunt passed away a few months ago, and before she was, she knew she was dying, and she started giving me clothes, just throwing them at me, and we're having a celebration of life. And I thought, well, I'm going to wear something that she gave to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, color is significant in terms of, how and when we wear things in different cultures, that sense of ritual and how we dress. And the first part of your story really made me think of the abundance of clothing that many of us have in our closets. My son and their friends live in Boston, and they will often do these clothing swaps which is kind of becoming popular as a way, rather than just like trashing your clothes or taking them to, to donate, because chances are somebody else might want that sweater or that well-worn pair of jeans. And so they bring everything together and they sort of display the things out, and then people can pick and choose what they want. And you walk away and you feel like you've got some new clothes. So, yeah.
My name is Phyllis, and as you were talking, I was thinking about, okay, my own... Put the mic to your mouth. Oh, okay.
There you go.
As you were talking, I was thinking about my own relationship with my clothes, and a memory came to me that I have not thought of in a long time. We weren't very well off. I was the youngest of 3 girls, so I had lots of hand-me-downs. And I remember one night, it was before 1963, so I was, I don't know how old I was. Maybe I was 10, and I got a new dress. And I remember very specifically going to my closet and finding 2 friendly dresses that I could hang it on the closet, in the closet between them, so it wouldn't feel lonely on its first night. Yes, I'm neurodivergent. Thank you.
That's a wonderful memory, and it is interesting when we hear shared stories how those memories are triggered so quickly. Like, how could that get dredged up just like that? So whether those are good memories or sometimes not so good memories, maybe take the time to write some of these things down for yourself too and pass them along. Thank you.
Bobby, the first thing that I thought of when we talked about the topic was, first of all, my Bruce Springsteen 1978 T-shirt, but also some literature. If you think about pieces of literature that have an article of clothing that's, almost a character. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about an Icelandic saga where there's a headdress, and it's a character in the saga. Anyway, I want to congratulate you on your retirement.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Isabella. We loved your presentation also. Appreciate it very much.